All right, welcome back to the Conviction Fiction Podcast. I am your host, Antoine Rivers. And before we start the show, I just want to ask you something. Before we get started, have you ever heard the phrase your future self? And if you have, who do you picture when you hear the phrase your future self? Is it some upgraded version of you? Um, Probably more disciplined, more confident, more financially secure? Or is it someone who magically figured things out? Here's the truth we don't like to admit your future self isn't coming to save you. Right? Let's just get that out of the way. Your future self isn't coming to save you. Your future self is simply you with the accumulated consequences of the choices that you make today. And that's what we're talking about today. Not motivation, not hype, but strategic self investment, the quiet, often uncomfortable work you do now so that the version of you 5 or 10 years from now doesn't have to recover from what you avoided. This episode is about responsibility, not shame. It's about ownership, not perfection. And it's about understanding that every day, whether you realize it or not, you're casting votes for the life you will eventually live. This is conviction. All right, welcome back to the Conviction Fiction. I'm your host, Antoine Rivers. And we're going to answer the question, why do we procrastinate on potential? Why do we do that? Because when we start with the hard truth that most of us don't want to face, if we were to talk about our future self, we often imagine a completely different person from the one we are today. Someone who's more disciplined, probably more focused, more confident in what they do. Someone who somehow has figured things out. But that's the crazy part of it all. Future you is not a separate human being. I mean, you don't wake up with a, how can I say this? They don't wake up with new habits, new courage, or new wisdom that magically somehow appeared overnight. They wake up with the consequences of today's decisions. And that's the future you. And yet we treat responsibility like it's something we can push down the road. I'll just get serious later. I'll start when things calm down a little bit. Guess what? I'll work on myself once I feel like I'm ready. When I'm ready, that's when I'll work on myself. And that's how potential gets postponed indefinitely. One of the biggest reasons this happens is instant gratification. Comfort is often persuasive. It promises relief right now. Now, growth, on the other hand, it asks for your effort before reward. And that's a tough sell when you're already tired, overwhelmed, or carrying the weight of past mistakes. So we choose what feels good instead of what builds capacity. Now, scrolling instead of studying, that's something that we're all guilty of, right? We'll sit there on the phone and scroll through millions of reels or thousands of reels per day. Some of you guys probably go millions of reels per day because they're short. It's like only 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds of instant gratification. And we'll rather do that than to study. We'll avoid like tough conversations instead of developing emotional maturity. Distracting ourselves instead of sitting with discomfort long enough to learn from it. Those are all signs that we are neglecting or not growing our future self. And here's where the regret paradox comes in. This is how it all comes full circle. When people look back on their lives, regret rarely comes from the things they tried and failed at. It comes from the things they never started because fear or comfort or self-doubt convinced them to wait. I hear it all the time, especially from people navigating reentry or major life transitions. Oh, I wish I would have started sooner. or I thought I had more time. The more popular one, I really didn't believe in myself enough back then. Right. But here's the part that matters the most. Confidence doesn't come before action. Discipline doesn't show up after motivation. These things are inherently built in. They are built through repeated follow through. They're built through repeated follow through. Your future self isn't asking you to be perfect. Your future self is asking you to stop pretending that that tomorrow will do the work that only today can handle. Every choice you make is either relieving your future or quietly burdening your future. That's what it's all doing. So we're going to talk about the butterfly effect of those tiny habits that you had. Most people really underestimate how change actually happens. We've been conditioned to believe transformation requires some dramatic moment, like a breakthrough, a crisis, a rock bottom, a wake up call that flips everything overnight. But in real life, that's rarely how it works. Of course, when we talk about rock bottom in some of the treatment programs that I've been through, that's that self realization that you can't go any further, right? But it rarely works like that because the real change is usually quiet. It's unimpressive. It's almost invisible at first. And that's the butterfly effect, right? Small actions repeated consistently over and over again create outcomes so large that they seem disconnected from where they came from. A 1 degree shift doesn't feel like much until you realize it sends you to a completely different destination over time. Think about getting 1% better each day. No hype, no overhaul, just slight improvement stacked over time. Just read one extra page. Like you do one intentional walk, just one a day, 1%. One honest reflection instead of being distracted. One better response instead of just reacting off the rip. Individually, these habits don't look powerful. Now, collectively, they reshape your entire identity. This is also where skill stacking becomes critical. You don't need to master everything. You need to develop small complementary skills that create leverage later. You got to learn how to communicate. You got to be learn more emotional regulation. You have to be consistent. Even figure out digital literacy. That's one of the things I prided myself on, but had no idea on how to promote this platform. Think about self awareness. None of these skills go viral, but together they will open up doors. And here's the strategy most people never consider: the pre mortem. Right? We're talking about pre mortem. Now, instead of waiting for things to fall apart, just ask yourself, what's likely to challenge me in the next year? Will it be stress, old triggers, burnout, maybe a little bit of financial pressure, maybe a relationship strain? What likely is going to challenge me in the next year? If you can identify it, then you know what to do. Once you name what's coming, you can prepare instead of panic. All right. So we got to flip like this whole hyper vigilance thing that we are accustomed to, especially if you done time or have been through quote unquote the struggle. If stress is likely, you have to become willing to build routines that regulate your nervous system. I know that sounds kind of like far fetched and seems like scientific and stuff like that, but here's it is in a nutshell. If temptation is predictable, just create guardrails before your willpower gets tested. If growth is your true goal, start practicing discomfort while the stakes are still low. Don't wait till the end game to want to lock in, so to speak, because resilience isn't built during chaos. It isn't built during chaos. It isn't built when all the craziness going on around you. It's built in ordinary moments when no one is watching. The version of you that handles pressure well didn't suddenly become strong under stress, right? That version trained for it through habits that once felt like they didn't make any difference. Tiny choices don't stay tiny, they compound either for you or against you. Now, this is when you have to implement strategy beyond just like money or, I'm talking about self investment because that's what this show is about. You're investing in yourself, you're making those tiny little changes day by day that will eventually reroute your whole identity, change your whole identity, and, change the narrative because that's what this show is about. We are dedicated to changing that perception of who you were before prison, before you didn't care, before you were uh, self-serving, before you were locked up or committing crimes. All that stuff is being rewritten. If you're serious about changing the narrative of who you were and how people look at you, and you just want to live better, then this is the program for you. Now, when people hear the word investment, they usually think about money, how much they're saving, spending, or trying to get. But some of the most powerful investments you'll ever make won't show up in your bank account at all. You got to see where I'm going, right? They show up in how you think, how you function, and how you connect. Let's start with mindset. We talked about mindset on the show a couple of times. A growth mindset isn't about being positive or repeating affirmations. I know I can because I think I can. It's about adaptability. It's the willingness to learn from discomfort instead of running from it. It's sometimes as simple as asking, what is this trying to teach me? Instead of, why is this happening to me? Right? That shift alone changes how you experience setbacks. Failure becomes feedback and resistance becomes training. And this small little discomfort can stop being a threat and it can become a signal that something's changing, that growth is actually happening. Now, you can also invest in your health. There are 7 pillars to this thing. Health is a pillar that you need to invest in because none of this works without it. We talk about success like it's a mental game, but your body and mind are the operating system. If your body and mind is run down, everything costs more energy than it should. Your focus is going to suffer. Emotions are going to spike. Then you're going to start making sloppy decisions. Investing in your health doesn't mean perfection. We always talk about perfection on here. We're not talking about perfection. We're talking about intent, getting enough rest, moving your body regularly, paying attention to your mental and emotional state before it turns into burnout, anger, or even numbness. Now, energy is a resource, clarity is a resource. All of these things, stability is a resource. And then there's like your relationships. The people you invest in today often determine how well you navigate tomorrow. Not networking for status or favors or I know this person, but building real reciprocal connections. People who tell you the truth, people who support your growth, people who don't just benefit from you staying stuck in your old mindset. Now, isolation feels safe in the short term, especially when trust has been broken in the past. But short term, long term, we're talking about how expensive isolation can be. It limits your perspective, your accountability, and opportunity. Strong relationships act like social capital. They provide insight, encouragement, and stability when life applies pressure. So when you take a step back after you listen to this episode, take a step back, remember these pillars: mindset, health, and relationships. They're going to form the infrastructure of your future. You can have all the talent you have in the world, you can have millions of opportunity, but without this foundation, everything is harder to sustain. Strategic self investment isn't flashy, pretty much foundational. And the stronger the foundation you have, the more weight your future can carry. Now, there's this all unseen return on investment. Once you get those things solidified, the choices that you make, this can change what we sometimes term as luck, right? Like, I'm just lucky. No, most times you are getting a return on investment for what you put in when you start feeling lucky or when things start going your way. We hear this all the time when someone gets an opportunity. Man, it was luck. Man, it was just purely luck. Right place, right time, right connection, all of it lined up for you. But what rarely gets talked about is how much of that so called luck was actually built long before the opportunity showed up. Luck isn't random, unless you're talking about the lottery. But even that, when you're talking about alignment with the universe and all this other stuff, that could be a whole nother show. We'll get into that later. But luck it isn't random. It's often the visible result of invisible preparation. When you consistently invest in learning your skills and relationships, you create what I like to call serendipity engine. You don't force outcome. You position yourself so that opportunities have somewhere to land. When you're in the room because you showed up repeatedly and you start gaining trust because you follow through when no one else was watching, or even if you consider you're considered because you kept growing even when growth felt slow. Those are our landing points for those opportunities. For you can say it was luck, but you actually prepared yourself. This is especially important when life doesn't go as planned, which, let's just be honest, it don't do that often. It doesn't go as planned, right? So um, we got to learn to understand that setbacks expose what you've been building internally. If you've been stacking emotional regulation, if you've been stacking self awareness and problem solving, a crisis becomes something that you can navigate through. If you don't do those things, it becomes overwhelming, right? Setbacks become overwhelming if you don't prepare. Crises don't build character, it basically reveals who you are. Mental and emotional reserves work the same way as financial ones. You don't build them during an emergency, you draw from them. The calm you show under pressure is usually the result of choices made long before things got hard. Then there's knowledge. Knowledge compounds quietly. You got to watch knowledge because one article leads to a book. One book can lead to a conversation. And before long, that one conversation leads you to an opportunity that you couldn't have predicted. Most people never experience this because they stop learning once survival starts to feel stable. They don't talk about the continuous learning and what it does as it makes you more smarter and makes you smarter. It also expands what you believe is possible. Continuous learning helps you recognize doors instead of walking past them. Let me tell you something about the future, guys. The future will rarely announce its stuff clearly. It shows up disguised as conversations, problems, or chances that only prepared people recognize. I didn't know I was going to be doing this podcast for this long. I didn't know I was going to be writing books, but I was investing in myself and I stopped chasing luck. I started building a future that's both um, gratifying and something that I was ready for. Okay. So let's go on to our last, because I got to bring it all full circle, because your future self is going to thank you if you do it right. Now, your future self isn't asking you to overhaul your life today. That self that you envision at the end of the road, it doesn't ask you to like just flip everything around. It's not demanding perfection, clarity, or some massive leap. What your future self is asking for is one intentional act, something small but deliberate that makes tomorrow a little easier to carry. That's it. That's it. You just make one small step, one micro investment. Not something you'll get to eventually, but something you can do today, because tomorrow doesn't come or become different by accident. It becomes different because of follow through. If you don't have a car right now, one decision today can help you get that car tomorrow. And what I mean by that is, like, if you don't have a car, you don't have transportation, and maybe that transportation lack or that need is caused because you make poor decisions when it comes to managing your money. You can make a decision today to manage your money better that's going to set you up to get your transportation needs met in the future. Now, here's an exercise I want to give you. Pause for a moment and picture your future self. Like, look at, like, just pause for a moment and see who or what your future self looks like. Not surviving, not scrambling, but grounded. Just really grounded and think about your future self. Just be steady, be clear headed about this, because someone who trusts themselves because they kept promises to themselves over time looks a little bit better in the future. Now work backward. Now work backward. How do you get there? What did that version of you start doing when it felt inconvenient? What did you stop avoiding? What did you commit to before it paid off? That answer is your next move, guys. Maybe it's choosing rest instead of burnout. Maybe it's starting a habit you've been postponing. Maybe it's stopping a habit that you've been putting off for too long. Maybe it's just setting a boundary that protects your energy. Maybe it's learning a skill you've been telling yourself, I'm not ready for that skill. Maybe it's that time to learn that skill. Future you isn't built through motivation. They're built, your future self is built through repetition. Right now, every small action is a vote. You're either voting for stability or you're voting for struggle. You're either going to vote for clarity or for chaos. And here's where accountability matters, because if you're willing, say it out loud, man. Write it down. Share it in the comments. Not for validation, but for commitment. Because once you name an investment, it starts being an idea and starts becoming a responsibility. Your future self will never get the chance to come back and fix what today got ignored, but they will live with what today decided. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Be the reason your future self looks back and says, thank you for not quitting on me. This is the conviction fiction. No hype, no shortcuts. Just intentional work that changes lives. So at the end of this show, I just want to share with you guys, man. Yourself in the future isn't asking for perfection, man. They're asking for that one intentional act today. So here's your challenge. Identify one micro investment. Only one. Only one micro investment you can make before the day ends today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Maybe it's a walk. Maybe you're going to finally read a page in a book. Maybe it's going to be a conversation that needs to be started, a boundary that's set, or a habit that should have been stopped a long time ago that you're going to decide today to stop. Close your eyes for a moment. Well, it's okay. Just close your eyes. Now picture your future self, not surviving, grounded, clear-headed, and steady, at peace with who they've become. When you trace that version of yourself backwards, that future self, what did today require? What did it require? That's your next move. And if you're willing, share it. Put it in the comments, say it out loud, make it real. This is Antoine Rivers with the Conviction Fiction podcast. Be sure to go over to Amazon, check out the book, No Turning Back, and also pick up Turning Forward, which is, basically a book that I created with some of these same guidelines and practical steps, practical workbook material that will help change your life. Will help change your life. Help change the narrative. Thanks for tuning in again to the Conviction Fiction podcast. See you guys later.